Hi, welcome to the virtual week of our 30th anniversary year for Common Ground on the Hill. I'm one of the privileged few who have been here organizing for all of those years. I'm Linda Van Hart. I'm the visual arts coordinator since the inception of Common Ground. We are a multiple arts camp who aim to improve communications in the world, in each individual world, in our community, in the world at large, through better conversations through the arts. Tonight, we're going to feature the artists who are technically astute enough to teach virtually. We have artists from many states and places, as well as students from many states and places who've come together to enjoy the 30th anniversary of our Common Ground community. Some of us have been doing this so long, we consider each other family. So welcome. Tonight, we're going to begin our presentation with a brand new instructor to us. Kira Dulaney is from California. She is an incredible fiber artist, and she has shared, because she's in a different time zone with something else to do at this time, she's sharing herself and what her class is doing through a video.
Hello, my name is Kira Dulaney and I'm based in Oakland, California. I am a fiber arts teacher, predominantly knitting and crochet, but also weaving, embroidery, spinning, felting, and a variety of other fiber arts. And for Common Ground on the Hill, I am teaching a class that I titled Knitting Beyond the Basics. It's my first time teaching for Common Ground on the Hill, but I've been teaching in the fiber arts realm since 2002, and I have been doing fiber arts for about 40 years now. For this particular class, it was fun to come up with the curriculum because often my classes are just 2 or 3 hours, one time, and pretty narrow focus on a particular technique. But with the opportunity to do a week-long class meeting for a couple hours every day, I could really delve into a lot of subjects and kind of bring people from beginning skills, which were required, up to exploring different techniques and even a little bit of designing with a template. So for my class, I've got kind of a range of students, which isn't surprising. I have some people who have knit a little bit a while ago, or even knit a little bit kind of recently, and some people who've been doing knitting for a while and done a lot of projects, but know that there's some things that they're missing, maybe some faster, easier ways to do particular techniques, or some that they've been scared to try. So I planned it out so that each day we're covering a couple of different topics. We so far started our very first day with fixing mistakes. So this top part of the swatch here looks perfect. I made a lot of mistakes on this and then on screen show people how to fix them. We also explored some texture stitch patterns using just the knit stitch and the purl stitch. So we've got a couple of those on here. That was our first day. Today it got a little bit more interesting. We did some cables, which are these twists in the fabric. And then we also explored some lace, which is putting holes in on purpose in a particular place. You can kind of see how there's this vertical line here. Everything is stacking up in the right location. We also did a bit more fixing mistakes because, of course, people make mistakes. And so I had some students who needed to undo their lace work or diagnose something that was wrong, like a missing stitch or an extra stitch, and put it where it should have been in the way that it should be placed. We also talked today about blocking, which is a way to finish your knitting by getting it wet and letting it dry in the position you want it to be, which can involve kind of pulling a little bit. As an example of that, this is my unblocked swatch from today, and you can see it kind of squishes in a little bit. This is a blocked swatch of the same stitch pattern. It's in a different yarn, but you can see those cables much more clearly because of the blocking process. Blocking is also really important for the size of the stitches because some yarns can change when they get wet. They might get bigger, they might get smaller. And then tomorrow, which is our third day, we are going to be covering color work, doing different colors throughout our row and doing a little sample pattern like that. And then the other part of tomorrow is going to be having people design their own project. My idea for that is a hat because it'll get people knitting in the round both on a circular needle, which is 2 knitting needle tips connected by a plastic cord. And at the end of the hat, as it decreases and gets smaller and smaller, we usually switch to double pointed needles, which are needles that are pointed on both ends, and use 4 of them at a time. So that's my plan. I've got one person who doesn't like hats, so their homework for tomorrow is to figure out what they want to make. And we can really adjust that to pretty much anything. You know, a sweater's going to be a little intense for the class time that we have, but I'm hoping that people get to the point where they either design their own patterns or feel comfortable adapting patterns that they find for customized fit. I think that if you are knitting or crocheting or weaving or sewing or anything like that, you're putting in so much time in the making of the thing that it makes sense to add a little extra time at the beginning to customize it to be the fit that you want, the style that you want, the texture that you want, whatever it is. It makes sense to do something that's totally unique. And we had a great conversation today about how knitting and all these other fiber arts as well are really lovely hobbies because you get all the hours of entertainment and then you also get something that's practical to use at the end of the project. So I'm having lots of fun. I definitely have a range of different students. They have different learning styles as well as experience. They have different things that they want to do. I had somebody who was really scared about knitting cables yesterday and loved doing it today, which is really fun to see that that change so quickly, that people were nervous about something and maybe even avoiding it for a long time. And then they tried it, and I was able to break down the steps and explain it in a few different ways to hit different learning styles. And then they did it, and they were successful, and they realized that they like it and they want to do more. So that's been a really fun part of the class, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it. So thank you for having me teach at Common Ground on the Hill. I've really been enjoying it so far and look forward to wrapping up my class. Bye.
Thank you. Nice to meet Kira. Kelsey's been with us since 2009. She's taught a variety of classes with us, from toy making and designing toys to colored pencil. And this year she's teaching colored pencil. Kelsey, I think you're bringing us into your studio.
Yes, that's where I'm hanging out now. So this is where my students see me. This is where I do my Common Ground teaching. This is where I do my own professional, personal work. And this is just where I like to hang out all day. It's also very cold down here, which is perfect for the summer. So yes, I'm Kelsey Wailes. I've taught at Common Ground for what seems like forever, but also no time at all. So most of my life has been somehow in the Common Ground area, and it's a lovely, lovely thing to look forward to every summer. So this week, virtually, I'm doing a class on colored pencils and how people can use them to create their own illustrations from their imagination or memory. If they want to recreate their own drawing of a beloved pet or a family member or whatever. We have a whole variety of things going on, and it's different every year, and that's kind of what makes it so lovely. So we use Prismacolor pencils, which you can get in most art stores. They're incredibly versatile to use, and for the first several days of class, we kind of just play around and see what can we do with this very simple art supply, and what can we make our hands make them do? How do we recreate textures? How do we blend stuff together? So a lot of what we start with is just sort of playing around. And I taught in the public school system for a long time, a lot of which was like middle school and elementary. And even for grown-ups, I find that the best way to learn how to do anything is to sort of like play and enjoy and sort of take it seriously enough that you want to learn something, but be a little more humorous and loose with it so that you can enjoy it and learn from it. So we have been learning about textures and how to draw textures by like finding random toys in our house. So how am I going to recreate the texture of this very cute, soft, knitted otter with colored pencils and make it look convincing? So we talk about different techniques that people can use for that. And of course, you know, it's fun to just have like a little desk buddy that's helping you to learn and also giving you a little bit of playtime as well. Here's a very goofy looking dinosaur that has a completely opposite texture on it. How do we use different pressures on our pencils to create the shadows and the bumpy texture that this sort of waffle looking silly dinosaur with the googly eyes has? And if you're drawing something that looks just this silly anyway, you're not going to, you know, get as frustrated with learning something new if you're just working with something that's a little bit silly to begin with. So we've been playing around and experimenting with textures. So I had that little otter we were playing with a little bit, and people enjoyed that. I had a little finger puppet here that had a bunch of different textures on it. So we would keep coming back to this little fella to just play around and add on to techniques that we had learned about. We learned about how we can essentially get any sort of texture that we want. You know, this is a really fun word called scumbling, which is essentially scribbling with a purpose. But, you know, you can get a lot of different textures by doing this really simple technique. So it would be good for trees. It would be good for sheep, things like that. And we've just been playing on different stuff. We also talk about how colored pencils have really only been around for about 200 years, which seems like a very short amount of time. But we talk about how they're very forgiving and very versatile, and how you can use colored pencils in combination with things like paints, from watercolors to acrylic paints to crayons even, and markers, and they just lend themselves to be a very useful art supply. We also talk about and look at examples of different ways that other artists use colored pencils, because I have about 8 students in my class, and all of them are going to be drawing things differently from each other, which is what you want to see. If everything looks the same, you know, it's hard to learn off of each other in the same way. So as someone who worked a lot in teaching younger children, who now gets to teach grown-ups and kids as well, we talk about like different book illustrators and how they use things like colored pencils to create their illustrations. How are they similar and how are they different? So like, I love Margot Apple's illustrations for like the Sheep Do blah, blah, blah series. So it's a very soft use of colored pencils, and it has a lot of that sort of scribbly texture to it, but it works for this book so well. We talk about how some people have like a smooth blending. So like, if you're a 90s kid like me, you're probably familiar with this artist's work and their books. So we talk about how this person uses their colored pencil to make a soft fur. Or, you know, if someone is using colored pencils to be really, really dark on their paper and have a lot of pressure on there, this person's used their colored pencils with such pressure that it almost looks like oil pastels or paint. So we talk about how different artists use their colored pencils in different ways, and how they get their ideas or their illustrations across in a variety of different ways, which is really fun and cool. For what I do with colored pencils for my own personal use is I usually do illustration work for either like sort of in a cartoonish sense for illustrations of like creatures and animals, or I'll do portraiture of things that, you know, I'm asked to do or hired to do, or just things for fun. And we talk about different layers and different ways you can apply your colored pencils to paper with different things. So let me grab a few of those. So I love video games, a whole bunch. So video games they're not real people, but you can make a portrait of a video game character and make it really fun. So I'll have like, you know, whatever video game I'm playing, I'll use colored pencils to make a drawing of a character or scene that I like. So this is a just standard video game character, but we talk about, you know, how do you get the texture of, you know, rusty metal, or this guy's sweater, or this person's unrealistic, incredibly stylized video game hair, and stuff like that. So I'm going to share my screen for a second and show you guys some stuff and close-ups of what colored pencils look like in a way that's probably a little easier to see than holding it up to a webcam. And some of my students have started sending in their images of what they've been working on for the end of the week slideshow. So with their permission, I'll show you a couple of those that people have been starting to send in. So let me push some buttons and let's see what we got. So here we go. Let me move you guys as, ooh, my thing froze. I wonder if it's because there's too many people on Zoom. There we go. Now we're good. Okay, so I've been using colored pencils since I was a proper kid. My parents got me a set when I was about 14, and I've been using them for the past 20 years. So they're really fun. They travel well, and they're easy to work with. So you can see on a zoomed in part of this detail on this drawing here that you can use lots of layers of color, lots of little lines to create all sorts of textures and sort of depth of color and luminosity, which make colored pencils a really fun medium to work with. They're very forgiving, and you can pretty much indefinitely put layers of color on top of things, which makes them really lovely and easy to use. We also talk about a little bit in class, if people are using white paper with colored pencils, sometimes those whites can be hard to put on top of what you colored. So sometimes we'll talk about different things that can work with colored pencils, from things like paint, or if you want to draw something with like a metallic Sharpie over something to give something a shiny metal look, or to add in some bright white highlights like I've done on this person's hand and suit. That's something that we learned a little bit about too, because colored pencils essentially add a whole new surface on top of your paper. So when you put paints and markers and things on top of colored pencils, it's almost as if you're drawing on a new piece of paper, because those colored pencils will add a whole nother thing on there. So there's just like a close-up of some colored pencil layers with different pressures that people can apply. There's some more paint stuff that you can see on top of colored pencil. So like I said, they're a really useful medium, especially if people like playing with different sorts of colors. This is a picture I was asked to, or excuse me, hired to do of Freddie Mercury, which I really, really loved. So he himself is done in colored pencils. There's a little bit of white and blue highlights of paint in his hair, and the background is colored pencils with blobs of paint. That's what I was asked to do. But colored pencils are really useful and versatile. You can learn so much.
Now, can you guys see it
Yeah.
better?
Yes, now we can see it. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So as I was saying, it's a new way of looking at printing, and also a new way of looking at painting, especially with watercolors. What you're doing is you're printing on a piece of plexiglass as your printing plate, and you're applying watercolors to a sanded piece of plexiglass, and you're letting that watercolor dry. Then you can use an etching press, like I have done with some of these that I'm going to be showing you. Or if you are at home and you're doing virtual, like I've been doing the last couple years, and Linda was fortunate enough to be in my class a couple years ago when we were virtual. If you have brayers, or if you have a rolling pin, anything to compress that damp paper over top of the prepared plexiglass. What that will do is the damp paper, the water will rejuvenate the watercolor and transfer it from the plexiglass to the paper. And then you have prints that might look something like these. So these are ones that I did actually a couple years ago. These were not real old ones, but I did these with the use of a press that we have at school. And that kind of got me into thinking, wow, this is a great way to teach watercolor painting to students without having to stretch paper, without having them to get frustrated with, once I put the watercolor down, I can't get rid of it. I can't cover it up like with acrylics or oils. And I have to kind of deal with it. With this technique, if they don't like what they see on their plexiglass, they can wipe it off all the way up to the point that they actually decide, oh, I like this, and I think I'll print it. So let me go to the second one here. I started this technique, as I said, with a class that I took down at Maryland Institute. It was a monoprint class, and I became really interested in landscapes and the idea of multiple panels and panoramas. So you're going to see quite a few of these like long landscapes, and that kind of got me hooked on this idea of, I can do a print on this plate, and I can attach it to another one and attach it to another one, and then they started to become they started to grow. I predominantly worked with watercolors and discovered that all of the painting techniques that I had learned in the past and were learning in my watercolor classes in college applied to using them in the classroom as well as on my own work in this printing technique. So these are all pieces that were done from plexiglass watercolor on the plexiglass and then running it through a press. And that pressure of the press pulls off even the, washes and the dry brush and all of those wonderful techniques that I had learned to do just on paper. And as I said, what's nice about this technique is you're not working directly on the paper. So if the color is not intense enough or you want to make it a little bit more intense, you can always go back into it and keep adding more paint and so forth, or changing things or wiping things out until you say, oh, I think this one looks, finished enough to print. And then I think the next step is I'm going to take you through the process. So this was one of the multiple image panoramas. And my students this week, as well as in the past, have kind of done a landscape that's kind of a panorama. So it connects one panel to another. And they can make them the same size, or they can make them different sizes. And you can use whatever size plexiglass that you want. Most of the pieces that I used in the classroom were about 12 by 12 at the maximum size, because my press was about a foot wide. So I would make sure that, they could still, put it through the press and use the press. But I have little tiny pieces, all the way down to like 4 by 6s. And then all the way up to 1 foot squares. So this is on the plexiglass. So this is the watercolor on the plexiglass. And just like with watercolor, you're assuming that your paper is white or something very, very light to catch all of the white of the paper. Areas that you want white, you paint around just as if you would with watercolor. And areas that you want lighter, you add more water to create different values. When I do this with my class, I review color theory, color mixing, basic watercolor painting techniques prior to them painting on the plexiglass. So on day 1, we went over all that. We did some playing with just basically some color mixing and complements and all that. So they would know how to take basic colors and create neutral colors, also to tone down colors. And then we did on just paper, just practicing, various painting techniques like white interval, washes, dry brush, etc. And that really kind of helped them to learn, oh, okay, this area in here, I'm going to do that last because that has a lot of paint, a lot of detail. These areas for the sky and the sand and the water, I might want to do first. I might want to do wet into wet. So I might want to wet my plexiglass and drop the paint in and let it run and bleed. We also talked about special techniques, using salt, sponges, toothbrushing, wiping areas out, all different kinds of those special techniques that would help with creating the effect on the plexiglass, just as if we were painting on paper. And then after you're done your print and it's drying, and you can take a hair dryer to it. Some of my kids get a little antsy and they're like, I want to print this right now. So I have them cut paper to a little bit larger than the size of their plexiglass. So they have a margin because it is a print, and we're going to sign it like a print. Usually in the classroom, I'm using about 90-pound white drawing paper, which is pretty heavy, and it won't fall apart real readily, even after leaving it in the water for maybe 15 minutes to a half an hour. Unless you are using really, really heavy watercolor paper, I don't think you're going to need 30 to 60 minutes, but probably 10 minutes to 20 minutes should be plenty for most of your paper. Then take it out, drain it. I usually have my kids hold it by a corner, let it drain, let the water drain off, and then put it on paper towels or newsprint. Put some over top, blot it with your hands. And then you're ready to do the print. So the paint on the plexiglass must be dry. If it is not, and you run it through a press, there's more chance that it will stick to the paper, or the paper will stick to the paint. So make sure that your paint is dry. Make sure your paper is blotted well enough so it doesn't make the colors run, because if it's too wet, the colors will just want to run all over the place because they're watercolors. And that's the nature of the watercolors. Sorry, let me go back. And then you can take a rolling pin, a brayer, to burnish and roll over your plate. And you can see this one, I rolled quite a bit, so you can see how it's starting to come through the paper. If you use heavier paper, it certainly won't do that. But it may not, if you're doing it by hand, may not pick up as well. We kind of found that out kind of by trial and error as well. I sent my students this wonderful Reeves etching paper, and it's wonderful, and it's soft, and it's smooth, and it picks up beautiful prints. But when you're doing it manually and virtually, and you only have a rolling pin, it doesn't print quite as clearly. Okay, and then this was the print. So you can see this was the paper. I put it on top. And then when you peel it off, you will notice, sorry, this thing is really temperamental. The plate is up here at the top above the print, and you can see that the image is flip-flopped because you have flipped your paper over. So when students do an image that would look strange backwards, if it has letters or numbers or whatever in it, and it's going to look weird backwards, I tell them to flip the image before they, transfer that, or make sure that their drawing is backwards, because when they print it, it will come out the reverse direction. And you can see that it comes out really nicely, even with a rolling pin. We have found kind of this week, as I said, I've been kind of trial and error on some of the effects that you can get with different kinds of paper. So I've been kind of going back and forth with thinner paper, like just regular sketchbook paper, and also not rolling it quite as much as you normally would. With a press, the pressure is so intense that it picks up all of that paint just with one sweep over and one sweep back. And then these are, this is a painting that was done on plexiglass for my grad school class. And as I said, this was way back when I was in at Maryland Institute with Sam Peters. And he, kind of got into lots of different techniques. I really got into the idea of using watercolors. And that's kind of what hooked me to these long landscapes. But then I also, he worked with a lot with oils, and I experimented with oils and monoprints. And here's a couple abstract landscapes done with oil paint. Obviously the oils, you're not gonna let them dry. But the damp paper does some pretty neat things to the printing results when it hits that moist oil paint. And it creates some really neat effects. So the oil and the water obviously are kind of working against each other, but the results come out really neat. And I did some oils, but then I kind of went back and retreated back to my watercolor techniques. And I really liked the way, the watercolors kind of almost separated from when they hit the plexiglass. They didn't necessarily, they created some hard edges. You can let areas dry. You can rework those. You can use watercolor pencils. One of my students this week has been, working a little bit with watercolor pencils. It's going to depend on how much wax is in the watercolor pencils as to how much they're going to transfer. But I found that if you dip the watercolors, I used to use Caran d'Ache watercolor pencils. And they worked really well if you dip them into the water and then apply them to the plexiglass. So they will also come out really, really nicely. And then finally, My series, these were a series of oil monoprints of machinery. And these were what I was working on as my subjects for my thesis show way back in 1991. And these were some smaller prints that I was doing of those. And in the same kind of technique that I was dealing with the landscapes. And I used the etching press for these as well. But I found, even with the oils as well as with the watercolors, using this technique created just another avenue for expressing, what I was kind of looking for. So let me stop sharing. So that's kind of sums up what I've been working on for the past couple years. And it's been a pleasure working at Common Ground and working with Linda and everybody there. And you all have a good evening.
Thank you, Susan. Sasha has been teaching with us a couple of years. I think Maria Wong's husband took a class from her one of the first years she taught with us. And often instructors who work with digital media are more involved with that, what the computer can do than what the camera can do. But Sasha's masterful in both ways, and I heard from him very specific techniques that she coached him with to improve his relationship with his camera and thereby improving his image and his ability to make those images even better with the digital media. So welcome, Sasha.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much. I remember Andy, he was such a good student and he turned in such wonderful work and he was so fun to work with. So I'm really glad that you mentioned him. He was one of my favorite students. And so first I would like to say a little bit about myself. I am currently living in North Carolina with my family. I've been working as a photographer, as a professional photographer for the past 10 years or so. My photography focus is families and people, and I take professional shots for people to use on their websites, etc. But for my personal fulfillment, I really enjoy photographing nature, photographing flowers and landscapes. And this is where it comes really handy to have a cell phone. The technology with cell phones has gone so far that they are very quickly catching up to what a DSLR camera can do. One of the huge advantages of cell phones is you can really stick it like from any angle, and you can stick it really close, you can stick it really low and really high, unlike a camera that is so bulky that you have to sort of struggle with it a little bit. And as photographers, we are not like regular people. Regular people go through their day, through their life, observing things because they need to know where they're going. Maybe they do notice a cutesy thing here and there, but as photographers, as art photographers, our job is to document things that other people would not see. And with macro photography, this is even more noticeable, because with a macro photography, we can go so close to a subject that we document something that other people would just completely pass by. And that way they miss out on a lot of beauty. But it's our job to point that beauty out. Anyway, I would like to tell you a little bit about the class that I am teaching right now. Let me consult my notes really quick. So first of all, on day one, we reviewed how to hold a cell phone. It might seem like a silly thing to anybody that uses a cell phone. I mean, how do you hold it, right? But the biggest issue with macro photography is that things get so blown up, so large, that even the tiniest movement will shift the image within the frame a lot. So we covered how to do this, how to eliminate the shake, some of the techniques that we can use to do this, but also some of the equipment that's out there that we can buy or borrow in order to help the situation. We also talked about lenses, how we can actually attach new lenses onto the actual cell phone, and those improve your photographs as well. Then we moved on to learning about lighting, about intensity of lighting, about direction of lighting. And this is where things get really fun, because the experience levels and the taste differences, the diversity of taste amongst my students is so wonderful, that they all bring in a variety of things, and they all bring in a variety of just experiences. It's really great. Where I started challenging them is when we started talking about various composition styles. I like to make things a little hard, and it is because after my students leave the class, they will have a sense of achievement. They will know that they walked in with knowing some things, then feeling like, oh, this is too hard, I don't know that I can do this. And then realizing, hang on a minute, I think I did it. And now I'm that much smarter. They walk away with skills that they can then use throughout the rest of the year. And so I like to jam pack my week with new skills to learn. So we talked about the harder types of composition, which many artists may be familiar with, and that is the golden triangle and the golden spiral. And the students did a wonderful job at this. They thought they were not going to, but they really did. It was great fun. We also talk about photo editing. And for this subject, I chose two apps. One is Lightroom for mobile, and the other is Paintbrush. It's an app called Paintbrush. We will talk about Paintbrush tomorrow. That is going to be on our last day. It is an app where you can create a piece of artwork that looks as if it were painted. It creates some wonderful effects. And Lightroom is used for organizing photos, but also for cropping, editing. And now a new feature with Lightroom is for eliminating objects that you don't want in the picture. They started using AI, and this is a really sophisticated way to remove an object where the application basically fills in the piece of the picture where you took something out, and really intelligently. It really makes it look complete. So we've had a lot of fun with that. We've had a lot of fun with photo editing and reviewing each other's work. Let me see. So one thing that I want to mention, the advantage of taking an online class has become so apparent to me this week. I have a student who is traveling for work, and he is still able to take this class long distance, and he's still able to do the work and squeeze it in between his other tasks. So I'm so glad that Common Ground has decided to do these classes online, because I think that all these professionals, or even people who take a vacation in that week, would not be fitting with their family schedule. They are still able to participate in our classes and to have some fun. Anyway, I would like to give you a short presentation of some of the photographs that my students worked on this week. I'm going to try to share my screen and see if technology will cooperate with me. Let me see. Okay, so first I will play you the slideshow, and then I may talk about some of the photos in detail. If it cooperates. Let me see. So, okay. Let me just do this really quick. And nothing is happening. Okay, I will just basically go through the photos really quick. There are 31 of them, so I don't know that I'm going to take about all of them in great detail, but maybe I can show you some highlights of some wonderful compositions that I really like. So for example, this one, what a strong photograph. Who would ever believe that this was taken with a cell phone? Can you see it? Can you see my Lightroom? Thank you. Yeah, this
Yes,
is
we
one of
see
my
it, yeah.
this is one of my favorite works. It was taken by my student Stacy. For example, this photograph, look at the composition. My students are taking their photos at home, and to create a piece of artwork, all you need is just a handful of Skittles. With a good composition, you can create an interesting piece of artwork. This one is also one of my favorites. How beautiful. I will also show you this because I skipped it. This is also a very simple composition, very well edited, good use of light. I really like it. This is one of my favorites. Look at that. So simple, so pretty. And who would have thought that this was taken with an iPhone? Look at the detail. Pretty amazing. Another one, look. Gorgeous, just stunning. I will just, so that I don't make repetitive comments, I will just kind of forward the presentation through and I'll let you look. This is also one of my favorites. I love the fact that the rose was not taken as a whole, that there was just a portion of it taken. Another beautiful one, again taken with an iPhone. Look at the detail. Technology is moving forward so fast that soon we will not even need DSLR cameras. This is a photograph that a student brought into the class. It was obviously not taken in class. In my class, students are welcome to do this, even though it's a macro photography class. We also cover photo editing. And so I welcome any type of photograph that people can bring in that they find issues with. Either composition-wise or adjusting color, adjusting contrast, because I am there to help them. And ultimately, I would like them not only to improve their macro photos, but all of their photography in general. Sometimes students also come in with issues that they encounter, for example, nighttime photography. And of course, they are more than welcome to bring in those issues, and I will explain to them how to do that. Just to show you, I was trying to mimic nighttime. So I used a shopping bag and I stuck my cell phone into the bag to pretend that it's dark. And I demonstrated how to use your camera in dark situations. Anyway, so I will move on forward. This is another very pretty composition. One thing that I do want to mention is students come in with a variety of levels of cell phones. So different cell phones have different capabilities. But what I'm noticing is that it doesn't prevent them from making really pretty compositions. Once they are given the basics, or once they understand the composition, the kind of work that they turn in is really beautiful. This is the centered composition. And this is another centered composition that is really pretty. Again, amazing that this is done with a cell phone. This one is very texturized. This is done by the student who is currently traveling. And I'm really enjoying the observations that he has while he is working, or while he's moving from place to place. And I really like this composition, how it's all kind of squared up. I have a couple of his compositions that are not macros, but of course he's more than welcome to bring in those to class. Here's another one, a very nice composition, and another one, and this one, gorgeous. And I didn't show you the first line of this. So let me just go through the first line. I absolutely love this picture. This is a creative way of using the directional light. Normally we are used to taking pictures from the front, but this one is using the light from the back, and I really like it, how you can still see the light through the flower. Beautiful composition again. The color in this to me is just striking. I think the student did a really good job. This is a different angle of the same flower. Again, what I'm challenging my students to do is to look at one subject, but to look at it from various different ways. And this trains us to observe the things that we normally wouldn't notice, and it pushes us to pursue new points of view. Again, very pretty composition. Same thing here. This is a backlight. And this is one of my favorite compositions as well. Again, centered composition, very pretty. And here's one of my favorites as well. Again, just a scattered few pieces of candy, and it makes a beautiful piece of artwork. And this is one of my favorites as well. And here we are back to the leaf, and I think this is where I may have started at the beginning. So these are examples of some examples of my students' work. I am really enjoying this class. Tomorrow is the last day, as I mentioned before. Tomorrow we will be applying paintbrush, and I truly can't wait to see what my students will come up with. So I want to thank you, Linda, for having me this year. This was an absolute joy to be here. I will stop sharing my screen now. It was an absolute joy to be here, and hopefully we can see each other again next year.
Thank you. Thank you, Sasha. Beautiful images. We'll go, and several of Sasha's students are in Robert Pullen's class. So it's been very interesting to have them come from a macro photography class that focuses on flowers and plants into Plant Speak. This is Robert's third year with us virtually. Did a class on dreams 2 years ago. And last year we came up with the first of our Plants Speak series. And he's going to introduce that to you now.
There I am. Thank you. I've really enjoyed seeing the work that other classes are doing, what teachers and students are doing. That's fascinating. Our class is not so much a hands-on how-to class as an effort on the part of myself and the others who have taught in the class to encourage students to deepen their relationships with plants, and then to draw inspiration for artwork out of the relationships that they're building with plants. Each student's been invited to choose a plant this week and to learn about that plant, to listen to the plant, to think about different ways to represent the plant artistically, or how the plant has been used in other artworks toward the idea of them doing some kind of work of their own. And we're almost there. We've had some reports from some students who have started their project, and tomorrow we hope to hear from some more and see some of their work. I've been the primary teacher coordinating things and have tried to bring my experience with the Native American culture of the Muskogee Indians, who were originally in the Southwest U.S. and were then moved. Most of us were moved to Oklahoma, though there are remnant communities still behind, and how plants are used in culture, focusing particularly on how plants show up in ceremonial context, in ceremonial objects, and in actually used in ceremonies. We had three others who contributed, three other teachers who contributed to the class. Pat Brodowski, talked to us about how the Lewis and Clark expedition collected plants in their journeys and how that connected with Native American use of some of those plants. And then Barb Steele focused on Native American plants in the Central Gulf Coast and area. And then Linda pinch hit for us at the last minute and shared how her work, her jewelry making uses different plants. And so we had a wealth of information and have enjoyed talking about plants and using plants. And we're looking forward to seeing how those plants show up in the artwork of students. I've shared through the week some of my the objects that I have prepared for use in ceremonies, baskets and mats, and we actually looked at preparing a plant medicine today. But rather than get deeply into that, I'd like to, I think we have, what, about 15 minutes left, Linda, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me yield the floor then to our other teachers, and we can have about 5 minutes each. I see, Pat, I see that you are up and ready. You want to share with us what you'd like to say about our class this week?
Oh, well, our class was really full of great ideas about plants. And I just thought I would show you a little bit about a class we're teaching in the hands-on week. And we're going to make some, in this class, we're going to make paint. So we're going to make journals and paintbrushes, and also like a palette of paint I have here. You can see the shells. And we are making mineral paints and plant paints. And so this is a plant of Wailes. The whole entire plant has yellow pigment in it. And you can stew that up into a juice. And if you put acidify this juice and then add washing soda to make an alkaline, it should foam, and the particles of, that's nice, it's not even overflowing. The particles of color pigment will precipitate out, and then you pour that through a sieve like here, and then that is your paint that you can take and use on paper. So, or you can combine this now with oil for oil paints, acrylics for acrylics paints, gum arabic for watercolors, and so on. And so that's the plan. And there's a number of ways, a number of plants to precipitate out into filters. You can see this is dry now, and then it'll get ground with a mortar. You grind it up to make it smooth. This is red matter that's been precipitating. You can see the pigment is here, and that is from the madder plant, which is this one here. And it's from the root of the madder plant. So I find this stuff fascinating. And we mentioned a few dye plants during the Lewis and Clark talk. And then in a couple of weeks, Ken Coons and myself will be showing how to make a whole palette of paints and the sketchbooks to put them in. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Great, thanks. I'm glad you showed us that paint magic. I love that.
I knew.
That's great.
This is
Thank
some
you.
weld that's been sitting for a couple of weeks, and it really separated out nicely. So we
Mhm.
pour out the water, and then we'll use the bottom part.
That's great. Thanks much. Barbara?
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about, well, I had 10 plants that I showed outside. I had most of them potted. Ken came and photographed some that were out, but we talked about trees a lot. And I really love the Eastern red cedar. And we talked about the medicinal culinary uses that the native peoples used. Talked about white pine that grows around here. I gave him a project, just a little idea. And I think people are running off in various ways, which is wonderful. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. One of them was, I don't know if you can see that. There.
Yes, we see it. Yeah.
To get personal with the tree, to go out and collect some leaves. One of the trees that I love that I'd like to do something myself with is the sassafras tree. We've used it. I used it when I was a Girl Scout to make sassafras tea. But it has such varied leaves, from the 3-lobe to the 2-lobe to the 1-lobe. We learned it was daddy, mommy, and baby, but one way to remember that. But it's a very tree. It's been around here, been used. It's quite, all these things are native. The other thing is, I don't know if this will show because it has glass on it. One of the plants was the coneflower, and an individual flower, to look at it and look at all the parts of the flower, look at the leaves, the structure, the stems, and maybe take a photograph of it, do a monoprint of it. I like that idea. Do a watercolor, that's fine too. But to really analyze the parts of a plant. And I gave a lot of good references that you can, books that you can look at, but it's kind of a very old botany project to do. So that's what we did this week, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Thank you, Barb.
You're welcome.
Well, Linda, we have about 10 minutes. Why don't I'll take 5 minutes and show my little slideshow of things that ceremonial objects that are related to plants, and then you can take the last 5 minutes to wrap us up. How about that?
Thanks. Sounds good.
Okay. Well, somebody turn me on, and I will. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope that's not working. Okay, I found it. Okay. So we talked about plant arts in Muskogee ceremonial life as an example of how plants find their way into art. Now, these are all objects that are things that I've made. One of the things I've enjoyed about being involved in Muskogee ceremonial life is that it gives me an opportunity to make neat stuff that then has a place in ceremonies. So I'll go quickly through. First, foiled baskets. Baskets contain important ceremonial objects. This is a tobacco basket. It holds tobacco and keeps it respected and honored and safe and ready for its use in ceremonies. This is a medicine stick. It's a kind of a badge of office of a medicine person in the Muskogee culture. This is a pine straw basket and a cedar stick. And the stick doesn't have any really serious important purpose other than maybe drawing on the ground or indicating by the fact that you have it that that you're a person that works with medicine. The cattail mats are woven as a part of a demonstration of your capacity to serve as a leader. The idea is if you can't weave things together and cause them to hold together, you're probably not very much of a leader. And here, cattail mats are supporting and honoring objects of power that are used in ceremonies. These are conch shell cups. They're about 6 or 8 inches long and hollow on the inside to hold medicines that are drunk or consumed as a part of the ceremony. The one on the left is it tells the story of the great bird and the origin of the ball game, and the one on the right is about visit of 4 teachers from the upper world who came down on the 2 canoes. Their symbols are standing up in the canoes, which we in the West see as the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. But in the Muskogee cosmology, there are 2 canoes. Here's a long mat that supports 4 seed sorting plates, wooden plates that are used in the spring by women who take the seed that'll be planted in the garden and sort the strong seed from the weak seed and bless them with their breath and their hands and their prayers so that the gardens will be productive. So the mats make a seat for a place for these things to be. The next couple are gourds. This is a gourd that is used in the story of the origin of the 3 sisters, beans, corn, and pumpkin or squash. And don't have time to tell the story, but the gourd is used in that telling of the story. This holds a different story. This is the rain turtle used in making rain magic. And you see the little snake sleeping on the top. When you want it to rain, you turn the snake upside down, and that brings the rain. Plants are powerful in themselves. In this little tin, there is about a double postage stamp sized mat of little flowers. They're called little stars. They hold the power of the upper world because of the star shape, of the middle world because they grew here, and of the other world because their plants drew that power up. And you can put things in there that you want to charge up with power, like these little crystals that you might later use in medicine or in healing. And the last is this is lightning struck wood that's been made into little thunderbirds. Lightning struck wood has great power because it draws the upper world, the middle world, and the other world powers together. And these little totems of that lightning power is something that we use in our community as gifts to visitors to honor them for coming to be with us, and hopefully the Thunderbirds will call them back. So plants show up in our ceremonies and in our ways of managing power. Okay, Linda, to you.
Thank you. We have talked about plants in ceremony. We have talked about plants in nutrition, plants as medicine, and plants inspiring art. I'm wearing one of my newer pieces. I wanted to pay tribute to the various stages of being a woman, starting as a child in the bud, turning into a woman as the poppy flower, ending as the seed pod, which is the crone, also giving promise for renewal as the seeds burst and reseed themselves to begin the cycle of plants again. I'm teaching repoussage next week, sculpting of flowers and leaves. I would not expect one of my students to make a necklace like this in 15 hours of my excellent instruction, because it took me probably 3 weeks to make this necklace, working 8-hour days. It would be, however, possible to take a simpler silhouette like ivy, 150 varieties everywhere, and I have had students turn out an ivy circlet or an ivy shrug such as this in a week. So if you would like to learn that with me, it's 1 o'clock to 3:45 during the in-person week. We are wrapping up our virtual week tonight with this gallery talk, and tomorrow will be our last class. Our students will be submitting things for a virtual gallery, so look for that after the 14th when Maria gets herself together to post that. It will be on the Common Ground YouTube channel. And if you have not participated in the Plant Speak class, we have recorded that every day. And since plants have been of such interest in many of your classes, you might want to take the time to go look at those series of Plant Speak classes. This gallery talk will also be archived, as was the keynote address on oysters and the concert tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Thanks for joining us for this artist talk. The week of the 7th through the 12th, join us in person every night, even if you're not teaching with us or you're not a student that week. All the evening events are free. Join us in Rice Gallery from 6:30 to 7:45 for the gallery talk. Go next door to Alumna Hall and enjoy a concert. And if you can stay up late enough, you can join the jams. Bye. Good to see you.
Bye.